This is part 7 of our SwiftData series. In this episode, we create preview data to use in our UI. In the past episodes, we've created model classes with SwiftData. We created location, meeting, and employees. This time, we're going to create preview data. So our data is going to be stored in memory, and like core data, we'll interact with it using a context, and that's kind of a scratch pad. So let's create a container. We'll create our container in this closure that will execute in order to create our preview container. So we have our complete model, the location, the meeting, and the employees, and they're linked like this. And so when we build a schema, we could specify all three of them, but it's enough to specify meeting because meeting is linked to employee and meeting is linked to location. As I mentioned for our preview data, I only want to create this as an in-memory store. Here's how we create our container. We create a model container for that schema for that particular configuration. This can fail, so we have to do this with a try, and so we'll surround that with a do and a catch. And if we successfully create our container, we'll return it. And so this code creates a container, but it's empty. So let's put some data into it. I've got location, I've got meeting, I've got employee. You might remember that the meeting code looks something like this. It's got a reason and a time. And so I can create an array of meetings by just creating one meeting and creating another meeting, giving them reasons and time. Similarly, an employee has a badge number and a name, so I can create an array of employees by specifying this employee has a badge number and a name, and do the same for other employees. And then there's location. A location has a building and a room, so I'll create an array of locations by creating one location for a building and a room, and another location for a building and a room. So that's location, meeting, and employee, but they're connected to each other. A meeting has some number of employees, and an employee goes to some number of meetings. So we can create a method that assigns attendees for meetings. And so meeting 0 might have employees 0, 1, and 3, and meetings 1 might have employees 2 and 3. Poor employee 3 has to go to 2 meetings. And similarly, location is connected to meeting. Every meeting has a location, and a location might have more than one meeting. So we have a method that assigns locations for meetings, and in this case, meeting 0 is at location 0, and meetings 1 is at locations 1. So let's put this all together. I have a method called add sample data. It needs to know what container it's working with, and the container knows what model is involved, the schema, and it knows that we're storing things in memory. And from that container, we obtain a context because we have to write this information into the scratch pad and then save it to store it in the container. And so for each employee, let's insert that employee into the context. And for each location, let's insert that location into the context. And for each meeting, let's insert that meeting into the context. And once I have all the employees' locations and meetings inserted, I can connect them together. I can assign my locations for meetings, and I can assign my attendees for meetings. So my context has everything inserted and everything connected together, and my last step is to try to save this context. And if something goes wrong, we throw an error. So now let's really put this all together and go back to where we created our container. And between the time that we create the container and we return the container, let's add our sample data to the container. And that's it. We now have an in-memory container that is full of our preview data. And we'll use it and a persistent container next time.